Well, happy Wednesday, everyone. I hope you're doing just amazing. Well, today in our reading, we're going to look at um, some competition. We've been looking a little bit at Esau and Jacob and the competition that they've had uh, for birthright and what have you. But then Jacob he's run to Haran, or he's headed that way, where we ended up yesterday. Um, and we're going to see some competition between sisters. And the point of the story is that we're going to probably look at one aspect that says we need to stop comparing. Hi, I'm Pastor Mark with Heights Christian Church, and we are going through the Bible in 5 years. And we are currently in Genesis. And so we would love very much if you would join on a daily basis with this channel here on YouTube and subscribe to our channel. And every day you can read the Bible right along with us. And in 5 years' time, you will have completed the entire Bible. All right, well, without further ado, let's go to Genesis chapter 29. Then Jacob continued on his journey and came to the land of the eastern peoples. There he saw a well in the open country with 3 flocks of sheep lying near it, because the flocks were watered from that well. The stone over the mouth of the well was large. When all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone away from the well's mouth and water the sheep. Then they would return the stone to its place over the mouth of the well. Jacob asked the shepherds, "My brothers, where are you from?" "We're from Haran," they replied. He said to them, "Do you know Laban, Nahor's grandson?" "Yes, we know him," they answered. Then Jacob asked them, "Is he well?" "Yes, he is," they said, "and here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep." "Look," he said, "the sun is still high. It is not time for the flocks to be gathered. Water the sheep and take them back to pasture." "We can't," they replied, "until all the flocks are gathered and the stone has been rolled away from the mouth of the well. Then we will water the sheep." While he was still talking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherd. When Jacob saw Rachel's daughter of his uncle Laban and Laban's sheep, he went over and rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well and watered his uncle's sheep. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and began to weep aloud. He had told Rachel that he was a relative of her father and a son of Rebekah. So she ran and told her father. As soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he hurried to meet him. He embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his home, and there Jacob told him all these things. Then Laban said to him, "You are my own flesh and blood." After Jacob had stayed with him for a whole month, Laban said to him, "Just because you're a relative of mine, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be." Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah. The name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, "I'll work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel." Laban said, "It is better that I give her to you than to some other man. Stay here with me." So Jacob served him 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife. My time is completed, and I want to make love to her." So Laban brought together all the people of the place and gave a feast. But when the evening came, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and Jacob made love to her. And Laban gave his servant Zilpah to his daughter as her attendant. When morning came, there was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, "What is this that you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?" And Laban replied, "It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Finish this daughter's bridal week, then we will give you the younger one also, in return for another 7 years of work." And Jacob did so. He finished the week with Leah, and then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Laban gave his servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her attendant. Jacob made love to Rachel also, and his love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah. And he worked for Laban another 7 years. When the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he enabled her to conceive, but Rachel remained childless. Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, "It is because the Lord has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now." She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "Because the Lord heard that I am not loved, he gave me this one too." So she named him Simeon. Again she conceived, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "Now at last my husband will become attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons." So he was named Levi. She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "This time I will praise the Lord." So she named him Judah. Then she stopped having children. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous of her sister. So she said to Jacob, "Give me children, or I'll die." And Jacob became angry with her and said, "Am I in the place of God, who has kept you from having children?" Then she said, "Here is Bilhah, my servant. Sleep with her so that she can bear children for me, and I too can build a family through her." So she gave him her servant Bilhah as a wife, and Jacob slept with her, and she became pregnant and bore a son. Then Rachel said, "God has vindicated me. He has listened to my plea and given me a son." Because of this, she named him Dan. Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, "I have had a great struggle with my sister, and I have won." So she named him Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped having children, she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, "What good fortune!" She named him Gad. Leah's servant Milcah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, "How happy I am! The women will call me happy." So she named him Asher. During wheat harvest, Reuben went out into the fields and found some mandrake plants, which he brought to his mother Leah. Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But she said to her, "Wasn't it enough that you took away my husband? Will you take my son's mandrakes too?" "Very well," Rachel said. "He can sleep with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes." So when Jacob came in from the fields that evening, Leah went out to meet him. "You must sleep with me," she said. "I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." So she slept with her that night. God listened to Leah, and she became pregnant and bore Jacob a 5th son. Then Leah said, "God has rewarded me for giving my servant to my husband." So she named him Issachar. Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a 6th son. Then Leah said, "God has presented me with a precious gift. This time my husband will treat me with honor because I have borne him 6 sons." So she named him Zebulun. Sometime later she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and enabled her to conceive. So she became pregnant and gave birth to a son and said, "God has taken away my disgrace." She named him Joseph. "May the Lord add to me another son," she said. Okay, wow, what a mess. I mean, so, with the story that, the movies would have it be, Rachel and Jacob running off into the sunset and being supposedly forever happy. But sometimes, most of the time, life doesn't happen that way. And so, there were other people in the mix. And so, Laban pulls a fast one on Jacob and deceives Jacob and gives him Leah first on the first wedding night. And then he gives him Rachel. But he gets 14 years of work for it. And obviously, that was pull the fast one on Jacob. Jacob, who's pulled the fast one on Esau and on Isaac. And it's sort of coming back to him. But we see this dynamic between the sisters of Leah and Rachel. Leah is not the good-looking one. Rachel is. And Leah knows that the only way she could have married Jacob was because he thought that originally she was her. And she knew, and Jacob made no bones about it, that Rachel was his favorite. And so there becomes a competition between Leah and Rachel. And Rachel is very beautiful, shapely, and all of that, and Jacob is totally enthralled with her. But Leah is the one that gives her husband sons. And so, I mean, you can see this. You can see, I'm sure that Leah thought all the time, oh, if my husband would just love me. And I'm having sons, so maybe he will now love me. And Jacob never really, you don't ever see that Jacob was ever happy with Leah. And Rachel is like, she becomes jealous of her older sister Leah for having kids, even though she's beautiful. And so we see these two sisters that are basically having kids or giving maidservants away and as concubines for their husband, so that they can sort of win the poker game of who has the most kids. And I don't think that's a good reason to have kids, honestly. It's just a competition, because Rachel compared herself to her sister and said, wow, my sister's having all these children and I am not. She finally tells Jacob, give me sons or I will die. And then I'm sure Leah was like, oh, if I could just be loved by my husband, I'd be happy. And so they're all comparing because they want to somehow be happy because of the things that they don't have. Rachel has the beauty. Leah has the sons. And both of them want the other. It's crazy. We see this time. People with straight hair want curly hair. People who have curly hair want straight hair. It's always what we don't have. We need to stop comparing. Let me tell you a brief story. As I was growing up, one of my best friends in high school, he didn't go to college. And so I was looking down on him a little bit because he just decided college wasn't for him. And he started working in the real estate business. Well, a few years later, while I was still going to school and poor and struggling, he came back to town. I got to see him. He had his own business. He was a real estate appraiser. He had all kinds of wealth. He already bought a house. Everything was going well. I can't believe how jealous I got of my friend. I was angry. I was mad because I was still struggling away. And he had all the things that I wanted, but I had chose a different route. Well, it turned out that later I began to use credit cards to try to get the things that he had. And we ended up being major league in debt because of my jealousness. And so we need to learn early on that we need to stop comparing. We all have problems. We all have great gifts. The greatest thing to stop in our comparison is gratefulness. We can always find something to be grateful for rather than comparing ourselves to others. Well, those are my encouraging words for you today. I hope you take them to heart, and we will look forward to seeing you tomorrow.